Welcome back to the Catalyst Effect podcast. I'm your host, Isaac Big Data Carter, and today we're diving into a topic that trips up a lot of tech teams: how to deliver a project that meets the business needs. We'll explore the differences between building something completely new versus running projects in an existing company or on an existing product, and the insights from both a veteran and a junior working in product development. So joining me today is the veteran, Tim Dickey, senior consultant at Improving, a veteran in product, program, and project management, who recently ran an MVP for the very first time, and Dr. Gabriel Huerta, our resident business analyst and medical doctor at Cantalo, whose prescription for success includes a healthy dose of analysis. After all, an analysis each day keeps the chaos away. You definitely don't want to keep the doctor away from this tech project. I want to do a huge shout out to Cantalo Consulting for making this episode possible. If you're a startup or an established company looking to optimize delivery, we've got the expertise to help. Don't forget, new clients get 25% off all analysis projects through the end of April. So Tim, you and I met at a event a couple weeks ago, and you were talking about the differences between a new product versus working an existing product. Love to talk about that a little bit, and I invited Dr. Gabriel to be here because Gabriel's only ever worked on new projects, so I wanted to kind of get the comparison there.
Yeah, I think to lead this off, and given our audience is technical, I'm just going to say it. Oftentimes, you inherit a ton of technical debt.
Yep.
You inherit everybody's decisions, the choices that were made, whether they be preference or market driven from the start of when you joined uh, a a project or a program or even enhanced product development that's been going on for a while with all the assumptions that previous members of the team had made when they were going through the initial build. Um, it's even more challenging when we talk about packaged software solutions. So
Right.
think about a CRM, think about an ERP, anything that any of the large software companies put together, you're going to inherit their technical debt, their choices, their decisions. And so trying to build through that to get to a working solution becomes really challenging. And sometimes you've got to do a lot of decomposition to understand those decisions. And so that may put you behind as far as what you're planning to deliver and when you're planning to deliver it.
Now you're getting a lot of technical debt, but you're also getting a lot of tribal knowledge, documentation. At least a packaged or existing product has business knowledge and business use cases baked in. So while on a new product you get the clean slate, the requirements are also a clean slate, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And Isaac, there's that balance between rigidity and flexibility.
Yeah.
And I was actually talking to one of our clients at Improving about this, which is, when you buy a package system, you're also buying the processes that actually work in that system.
Yeah.
The moment you start customizing them to work to your particular business needs and the way that you've been working as an organization, that's when you really start to run into some challenges and you hit the constraints that have been architected into the system to allow the system to function optimally.
So, Tim, tell us a little bit more about your background. Obviously, we looked at your LinkedIn profile. You and I have worked together on in parallel for a long time, but you have a really impressive background both in project and product management space, right?
Yep. So I would say that the first touch of this goes way back, and it's not on my LinkedIn profile because of the gray. Uh, Back to when I started in the IT field in the early 2000s, working for Carnival Cruise Line,
Ah,
and specifically working on a custom built point of sale system. And I was part of a team where we were doing everything, I want to say in .NET. I don't even want to think about what version of .NET that was. And that really got me into, at the time, the whole software project management piece. And so I've evolved over the course of the decades now that I've got in the field to shifting to product development. And I've worked at Verizon, I have worked at IBM, and now I'm working at Improving. And I will say that being able to have this experience both with a clean sheet development team and as well package systems teams really helps me to be able to talk to the business, talk to the stakeholders in such a way that they can make informed choices about the trade-offs, build versus buy.
Nice. Awesome. So Gabriel, you have a lot of experience. You inherited a couple of startup projects that were underway, but the product was not yet in market. So you've worked exclusively with startups since you started putting your medical practice a little bit on the back burner and started doing a little bit more of the tech side. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Well, I like to think that analysis, the thing that I do right now, is I make the comparison right between analysis and medicine, because analysis could be the medicine for tech projects. If you think about it, if you diagnose the risks early, if you diagnose the features early, if you go ahead and you structure your specs in the early stages, you are avoiding major problems down the road. And as you said, I have worked closely on startups that are navigating new product development. And trust me, if you give just an ounce of time in analysis, you can get save like months of development.
Yeah, it's like what the cowboys used to say: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, so I'll tell a funny story. We were working with a client that was doing commercial relocations. So they were building a relocation platform, and we went to them and realized that there was a button that we didn't have the workflow behind. Like, okay, you got to tell us what happens when we click the button, and founders, creators, the business side, they connect to the design way faster than they connect to process flows. So we were saying, hey, we need to know what happens when we click this button. And they go, oh, you're right. That button design doesn't match the rest of the design on the site. We need to make it 3 colors. I'm like, okay, sounds awful, but we can do that. But what happens when we click it? Like, yeah, you're right. We need to have the logo in there too. Like, okay, cool. A 3 color button with a logo. Sounds horrible, but we'll do it. What happens when we click it? And 30 minutes later, I finally said, listen, I think we should just stop having this meeting. I don't care what color the button is. What happens when we click the button? And that's what a lot of, if you're in an established product, like if we're going in there and we're moving a CRM from on-prem to the cloud or we're adding features to it, we already know what happens when we click the button. But on a new product, those process flows are just critical. And in this specific case, the development team had already spent about 30 hours of developing, and now they had to go back and make changes once we realized, wait a second, that button is different if you are a vendor or if you are a client or if you are one of the people that are moving. So this is why, Gabriel, the first thing you always do is the user classes and characteristics. Who are the users? What are they
Yes.
doing? And how does their experience, their journey through the application differ? Tim, are you finding that those things are a little bit more clear on an existing application, or do you still have to get down to the roots of those things and identify those?
You've got to do it both ways, with clean sheet development as well as with package systems. Because if you don't know who is being served by the solution at a given state, then you can't work the architecture, let alone the workflow, to
Mhm.
get them through that process. And I like what you're saying, and this is actually what I led our team with when we were thinking about moving from MVP. I said we need to map the way that the data is going to flow through the system. We need to have a very clear understanding of what the touch points along these services are going to be, and of course where it's going to reside, where it's going to be transacted upon, and where it's going to be served to, so that we understand the interactions and the expected results of those interactions, so that we can effectively test and say, hey, this is working, or no, we've got a defect and we've got to fix it.
Yeah, it's people think, hey, this affects the user's experience, so we have to do this for the user's experience, and that's true. And they sometimes they'll make the jump to the developers need to know exactly what we're building and exactly what problem that we're solving, which is true. At the end of the day, a developer's job is not to build a solution, but it's to complete a task. They write code to complete the task and get the checklist marked off. It's the product team's job to ensure that the tasks that they're working delivers a solution that meets a need in the marketplace.
Yep.
But we were working on a project where the database servers were always at 98%. And twice a month, they would jump up to 110% and then crash. But they were never under 80%. Like 3 o'clock in the morning, no one's logged into the system. The database servers are at 80, 90%. And yeah, we could upgrade the database servers until we were using the biggest bare metal server that you can get on AWS and hosting the databases there. And now you can't get any bigger. There's nothing else that you can do. And it all boils down to, in an account table, they were updating the account balance every time the balance changed. And in fintech, that's all the time. So because they hadn't modeled how the data flows through the system, and then they were using an ORM, for our non-technical folks, object relational models are really quick ways to interact with the database, but they're never optimal or good queries that are hitting that database. And in ORM, it's going to say, oh, you need to know the balance when somebody logs into an account? Cool, just put that in the account table, and it doesn't belong there. Accounts never change. Tim, how often does your bank account change?
Hardly. Well, I have a wife and 2 daughters.
Okay, so every time you add a signer to the account, it's not millions of times a day.
No, of course not.
Quarterly, maybe.
Yeah.
But without mapping out exactly what the system responses and stimuli are, and mapping out designing the data model, not only is the user experience clunky, I mean, could take 2 minutes to log into your account, but also the stability and the cost to maintain. And then you have people with poorly designed systems saying, oh, we're going to solve our scalability by picking this poorly designed system up and dropping it in the cloud. And then, oh man, this isn't working. Let's repatriotize and take this poorly designed system and bring it back on-prem. And it all goes back to the design. It all goes back to mapping the entire system out.
Yeah. And in that rigor, really it saves a lot of headaches in the long run when you understand what the expectation is. And I think on both sides of this, when we look at packaged software as well as custom built software, it hasn't changed for the better part of 60 years. This was a thing way back before cloud computing ever was envisioned, and it's still a thing, and it's always going to be a thing. And I oftentimes have conversations with folks in technology, and I say one of the first things I learned in database design was data normalization. Boyce Codd's normal forms. Let's get it down to the smallest atomic piece that's most useful in how we're going to store data.
Yep.
And then organize from there. And a lot of people will argue with me and say, well, with object storage and unstructured data, and I'm like, no. Even metadata needs to have some way of being organized. So
Yep.
we're still working off the fundamentals that have been codified for decades.
Yeah, I remember one of my first jobs in early 2000s was in the late 90s. They had the industry had really been pushing the concept of a full stack developer. And they had one developer that was doing everything from database design to the UI and the service tier and everything. And they found out in the early 2000s that doesn't work. And you have to have a data specialist that is designing your data models and then a back end specialist. And the front end, I'm sorry, putting a data engineer like me on the front end is a recipe for disaster. Keep me 2 or 3 logical layers away from the end user. Because for me, if it's functional, it's beautiful. And I could figure it out. I mean, it's an extra 20 clicks. Oh, well, the database is running awesome. But professionals exist for a reason, right? And now we're going through that again. We have the full stack developer who's using an ORM to design their models and then persisting the model back to the database. And it's killing these systems.
Yeah.
So, Gabriel, I'd be interested to see your perspectives where it differs from Tim. Gabriel, in your perspective, what are the best components of a team? Like, who do you need on a team to be successful with a new product implementation?
For sure, I go straight forward to a good business analyst, product owner, a good PM, um, obviously the dev team to follow up the tasks that we need. But that's not just for what I do, but I think that the strong bases, as you guys were mentioning just a few minutes ago, strong bases are like two strong legs that you can run up and go ahead with the projects, because at the end, the developers just complete task that the product team already thought about. So I'd say that the core team is a good delivery team in those areas.
And Tim, it makes sense that Gabriel is going to be more focused on the first part of, okay, how do I run my project? How do I understand the product needs? How do I get the analysis together? Okay, cool. Give that over to the dev team. You've got a much more intimate view of what components on a dev team need to be there, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I am truly a believer in cross-functional teams, and I say this because with my most recent and current client engagement, building something from the ground up, we decided to go small. We had at any given moment we have less than 10 members on the team, which allows us to go fast because the feedback loops are so much faster. So we've
Yes.
got we've got a couple of really hot shot developers. We've got a user experience designer. We've got a couple of data scientists who are working the machine learning piece. Our
Mm,
product owner, our subject matter expert, um, myself, and I'm kind of the catch-all person. So like the last few days, I've been doing user experience testing, validating certain assumptions to make sure that they're functioning correctly in the system. And then we've also got our technical lead. You know,
okay.
these combined roles, and again, this is cross-functional. So we're going to have a meeting tomorrow, and of course, as of the date of this recording, I may be able to tell you something here after tomorrow about how this meeting goes. But it's around the testing and the quality, and I think even more important as we're getting ready to go to market, the overall expectation as far as our delivery schedule is concerned, because we're really now on a tight timeline. We've got some milestones that we need to always stay focused on as we're doing biweekly planning. But that fast feedback, that intimate involvement with the client, the product owner, and the subject matter expert representing their interest, is in addition to our development team, which is all improvers. We've gotten a lot of traction, and we're delivering value continuously.
Mm.
I get a piece of work. I test a piece of work. We close a piece of work out, and it deploys.
I'd
You know,
like to I'd like to rescue the things that you said there, Tim. First of all, speed and pace on MVPs or startups are a thing, and we know
Yeah.
I can tell you that you're totally right on that, because we have that strong feedback and strong communication. Because as you mentioned, you go from 1 to 10, and that could happen super fast. And the other thing that you mentioned that I have experience in is that you said you had more than one role, and that often happens in an MVP projects. If you're running startups, you often found like the product owner is the project manager and management, and then sometimes it could be a lead developer or a lead architect, and that's not correct. But yeah,
Yeah, and Gabriel has to fill a lot of different roles because I'll be like, okay, Gabriel, I need the wireframes designed. I need the dev team. I hurt my back. What do you think's going on here? I need you to have somebody design a character of the
yeah,
coach, and so Gabriel plays many important roles on the team. He keeps us operating, keeps us healthy. But I think this is what a lot of people don't understand. Like we run across businesses all the time. Hey, I've got a really good idea. I'm going to build it. I hired a developer, and
yeah,
it's just the business owner and a dev. And I can tell you 100% that that project's going to fail. Tim, do you remember the movie Office Space?
Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorite.
Do
And
you
I
remember?
oftentimes refer to it when I'm going, yeah, you want to see dysfunction? Office Space is a perfect example of what happens when it's somebody just taking and moving a cover sheet and a fax from place to place.
But there was a role that they deemed as useless.
Yep.
And they kept saying, "So, what would you say you do here? I take the requirements from the customer and I give it to the to the developer." Which
yeah,
a good product manager, that's really their job, right? They work with the customer to understand what they need, and then they help the developer understand. And that role is critical.
Mm,
Easy to pick on, fun
yep.
to pick on, but at the end of the day, a developer's job is to write code, not to deliver products.
Right.
So if you're
Right.
going to deliver a product, you have to have a team. 80 between 75 and 80% of tech projects fail. According to Forbes magazine, they published that for the first time in the early 2000s. Hasn't updated because the tendencies, the behaviors around how businesses their relationship with technology hasn't changed. Somebody has an idea, I need technology in my business. Awesome. I'm going to go buy a CRM or I'm going to go buy an ERP system. And then I'm going to hire a developer, or I'm going to hire an analyst, and we're going to implement it. That is a very expensive and frustrating way to fail.
Yeah. Well, in Isaac, I think some of this is still driven out of the fact and a belief that IT is a cost center rather than a
Yep.
revenue center. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. You're pinning the future profitability of your business on the software that gets purchased or developed. And how is that a cost if that's going to increase your revenue or your market share or organically grow through customer satisfaction, your customer base? I'm not sure it is really a cost center at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and if IT is a cost center, then where's analysis on there? Because you can't. How do you put a value on that? We have clients all the time. Hey, we have our Figmas. We're going to use Agile. Let's just start coding. And I used to say, okay, it's your money. You're the client. We're going to do it. I don't do that anymore because that is. I'm not. Well, you know us, Tim. We're winners. I have a really low appetite for failure, and I can tell you, if you are not investing in the analysis and you can't say what problem you're solving, how you're solving it, what technology you're implementing to solve that problem, and then specific tasks, very specific, you're going to fail. You're going to fail very expensive, and it's always going to it's going to end in conflict, and it's going to end in not having the technology or the systems that you need to succeed in your business and reach your goals.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it goes back to something that um, has been acknowledged yet unspoken, which is having a clear vision of what this thing will do. you know, because if it's focused on alleviating human suffering, which is by and large why we build these things,
Yep.
and we can speak to very specific types of people, personas. It's going to alleviate suffering for Joe. It's going to alleviate suffering for Maria. It's going to alleviate suffering for Yuki. Then we know who we're actually working for,
Yep.
who we're serving in this process of crafting a solution, of making their life better, making their freeing them up from the drudge work so that they can focus on what we as human beings are best at, which is solving difficult problems.
How many times have you been on a project and realized the development team wasn't aligned on what problem the business team was trying to solve. Especially development teams, I love technology and I want to be working on the next gen stuff all the time. But a lot of times the business is trying to solve something very specific, and the tech team will get lost on platform versions and architecture and AWS just released this new thing and they want to implement all the new things, and the business is just like, I'm trying to solve this problem.
Well, and that goes to the heart of MVP, minimum viable product, something that works to scientifically prove or disprove that hypothesis.
Right.
Yeah.
And saying, look, did this solve the problem the way you envisioned it to be solved? Yes or no? Cool. If it didn't, let's figure out the right way of solving it, or run another test or a series of tests in order to be able to get closer to what that solution looks like in your mind, but more important, in the mind of the market, because that's the critical thing. We can build a lot of things, but if nobody's buying it,
Yep.
Yes.
80% of new businesses fail. 40% of the time they fail, it failed because of a lack of product market fit. Another 40% is a lack of analysis. So if you do a discovery and then an analysis, you eliminate 80% of the reasons why businesses fail. And the discovery is simple. This is my mission. I'm solving this problem for these customers by offering these features in this manner. And that there becomes the mission statement. Every time somebody joins the team, read this. This is what we're doing, who we're doing it for, how we're doing it, and why. And oh,
Super easy.
cool, awesome. All right, next is the analysis.
yeah.
How am I delivering these features? What platforms and technologies do I need to do it? And what is my project plan, my roadmap for how I'm doing it and what it's going to cost?
Yeah.
And there you know what that button, that button's for.
Yeah. Well, and you
Yep.
say that, Isaac, and this is me and my product owner, and we are constantly, when we're planning, negotiating value. Okay,
Yep.
is this the highest value work? Is this thing going to be the tipping point that causes our testers, or your community, to want more of this?
Yep. And then here's the discipline point. Hey, this is an awesome idea. It's going to be so cool. Do I have to have this to prove the product, to prove the concept? Is this required to approach the market? No, but it's so cool. Don't do it.
And there's a simple way of defining that. You just use must, should, and could. And there you
Yep.
go. You got your prioritization method.
Wait, the Moscow method? You're crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
Explain that a little bit more, Gabriel.
No, I know Tim can do it better.
Cool, but I asked you to do it.
yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go through an example. Just a few days ago, a guy told me, a product owner told me, "Hey, I have this cool feature that I would love to have on this project that we're working on." So I said, "Okay, I want to know about that." And he's like, "Hey, we want to develop this and this and this," and I go like, "Okay, you're right. That's true. That's totally true. That feature will be cool for the next stage." So I tried stop him a little bit and said, "Hey, we're running an MVP. We're gonna have these must. Those are the things that definitely you need to have to prove your value. Then you have your should. Those features are good enough to be there, but if they're not slowing down your project, because as we mentioned, speed is a thing when we go through startups. And then a could have is basically we go we go for the next phase. I don't have those in mind for that.
Tim, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think it helps by using that method to look at, hey, you know what? This is what's going to prove that we can solve this problem. The must-haves. The should-haves are the things that are going to be the differentiator. They're going to be really the things that allow us to speak directly to the market and say, hey, we solved this specific problem, and these features, these functions are the things that are going to delight you about the product. And that's really in that going from MVP to market ready.
Yep.
And then the could have stuff is, hey, you know what? once we're in the market and we've got adoption and we've paid the bill for this thing, let's talk about the stuff that's going to just continue to delight and evolve with the changes in the market, this entire product experience.
We have a client that invested a large sum of money in their product, and they were telling me the other day, "Hey, part of this is a email sending system that competes with Mailchimp." I'm like, "Okay, I have a question for you. Mailchimp is $50 a month. How many months are you going to have to run this to get that back?" And she said, "Thousands." Like, why'd you build it? Well, because we wanted something like that in there. I'm like, MailChimp was there. It was an option. Use it. And then if you get to a point where you must have an improvement over what's available on the market, then develop it. But I got to tell you, AWS released their SES, and it's amazing, and it's really cheap, and it does all this stuff. So you tried to future-proof your application, and now you built something that's not even comparative to this other product that's there.
And Isaac, I think you hit on a really great point, because we forget that in this build versus buy equation, we have integrate.
Yes.
Where are these integration points that allow us access to services or features and functionality, capabilities, other platforms that will, by that integration,
Yep.
enhance the overall experience? Because, and I talk to clients about this, which is cool. I also know that this technology already exists over here. You think we should integrate that rather than try and figure out how to build it ourselves? Because I think we're getting off mission here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're our scope potentially is creeping.
Yeah. And at the end, if you integrate something like that, it helps you go out to the market fast. So
And maybe even Mailchimp has a app marketplace, QuickBooks has a marketplace, HubSpot has a marketplace. It may be that if you're integrating to current platforms, you can borrow their audience and expand your product way faster than you could if you were building it in isolation.
for sure.
Yeah, and
Now,
I know product thinkers are really starting to move in this direction, which is that co-marketing piece. It's like,
mhm.
get it in front of great, you're serving your core customer very well, but get it in front of more people, because then those edge cases also drive continuous innovation.
Yeah, no, I get it. I've been a data engineer, data architect for 25 years. Maintaining integrations to external systems can be painful. But maintaining the entire system is painful and costly too. You have to choose your pain. I
Yeah.
choose the pain that gets me to the market faster at a lower cost. And then when it gets to a point, hey, you know what? Integrating to MailChimp, they change stuff all the time. It's really expensive. If that's true, I haven't found that to be true with MailChimp. But if there is a system that's very expensive to maintain the integration, you're making money, you're in the market, you've got investors throwing money at you, go ahead and write the replacement for it. But don't do it when you're trying to test your product market fit.
Yep, very true.
Awesome. Gabriel, you were talking about a little bit about the roadmap and a little bit about how to know when something is like a must have or should have. With these new products you're working on, a lot of times you're working with founders, and founders are dreamers. I resemble that remark, guys. How do you help them understand what things, one, maybe cost more to develop or shouldn't be a part of the first? Like you were saying, you must have or should have or could have. How do you help them get down to the feature, knowing if they have to have it?
Okay, great question, Isaac. I think that the first thing that I really like to do is understanding the client, what he wants, and then when I notice something is creeping out a little bit or going a little bit further than we should, I try to make them realize themselves that if we go that way or if we go that feature over there, it's gonna slow down. And I go like I try to be super cool and relaxed with them, because it's better psychologically. It's better that if you realize yourself and you get like, I know I had the idea, that's right. It's better to guide them through at the end of deciding which feature can and cannot be. So what I do is go back to the early stages. I know that we understand this product. I understand what you're trying to build. Show them processes, show them the list of features, the timeline, and then sometimes I use help, obviously not in the same meeting or not in the same room, but if I have my lead architect telling me, hey, I'm going to be, I don't know, 3 weeks doing this, and then I go back to the client and say, hey, our team said that this feature is going to take more time than it should because this and this and this, obviously on words that everyone can understand, because, this role is for translating from one side to the other. And then they realize that it's going to slow down what they want, and then, okay, we can do that for later. So
Yeah, and
I try
impact
to
the
manage
budget.
that. Oh, of course.
Tim, have you ever used clickable prototypes, running like hackathons to deliver prototypes, anything like that?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, that this has been one of our strategies with where we're at in phase two on this product. Our user experience designer, she's doing a great job of putting together what the future state is going to look like as far as the application is concerned. And the click-throughs are great because
Yep.
when we're doing our reviews, our biweekly reviews, we can have the conversations around that. And she is phenomenal because she's talking to the developers as well as the product owner and the SME and making sure that her designs align with what the technology is capable of. And
Yep.
this for me is a huge thing. And that roadmap discussion, and I think Gabriel is really on point with this. It's got to be routine. And I when I talk to people about what I do, I often explain to them that I create radical transparency around the work being done. I don't want anybody to feel like they're in the dark,
Yep.
because as soon as somebody feels like they're being left out of the conversation, that's when we start getting a misalignment as to what needs to get done. And the more people that are involved in that conversation, um, we build shared understanding in that process of talking through these ideas. Talking through what they might look like fundamentally once we've gotten past a whiteboard and we're getting into Figma or we're getting into
Yep.
Sketch and finally getting something out in a wireframe within the UI on the dev environment.
I like to start with 2D wireframes, black and white
Hmm.
sketches, get the
Yes.
process down. We're not talking about button color right now. I need to know what this thing does for who and how. And then get into the prototype, get into the design, and then a clickable prototype where I can say, okay, here's the walkthrough from this persona. If I develop this, is it enough? Is there anything I can take away? Is there anything here we don't need? What else do we need? And iron that out before the developers even see the thing. Because what ends up happening is the developers go and develop, and then the business is like, oh, I need this other thing. And that is so expensive. So expensive at that point. It's building an application one line of code at a time is painful and costly. But at the same time, trying to visualize that from BPMN process flows and 2D wireframes, it's not something most business folks can handle. I don't think I can handle it. I need to see the application and know, maybe put my hands on it. And then I can tell you, you know what? If you take this 3D Gantt view away, the application is still viable.
Hmm.
Awesome, I'm taking that away. Hey, this really doesn't do anything without this report. Reporting is always in scope, guys. Developers always love to leave reporting out, but reporting's the point. The whole point. You're building the application for the data.
Yes.
But you need to know, like, hands on, see it. We're visual people, right? And then you can start to see, okay, hey, yeah, no, I don't need this other thing. I do need this thing. strip away as much as you can. Elon Musk says if you're not adding things back, you didn't take enough away.
Exactly, because it really does boil down to the most essential things
Yep.
that will give us the best understanding of how close to getting the actual problem solved. And if we've got a lot of fluff and a lot of
Yeah.
white noise and a lot of color, to your point, that it becomes a distraction and it doesn't hone in on this. Hey, we've dialed into this. We now know that we can manage three different entry points to get to the working solution.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, you got to leave as a founder. It's hard to leave your ego at the door because every one of your ideas, every one of my ideas is my baby. They're all like how. I had a truck that I bought from auction 10 years ago, and every bolt on that thing I tightened. Every part on the suspension, I chose it. And it sat for a year, and then I bought a new truck, and my wife was like, "You got to sell the other one." And I'm like, "Why? It's my truck." Well, you don't need two trucks. Well, we have three kids. We're not getting rid of any of them. and, and what you need to have in an application could feel the same way. Hey, I don't want to give that up. I put a lot of effort and thought into it, but maybe like my wife didn't value my lifted F350 Super Duty V10 four-wheel drive with the 40-inch wheels on it. My wife didn't value that feature, right? Not as much as I did. And that's what we have to realize as founders. The market doesn't love your baby as much as you do.
Yeah.
And you could keep it and maintain it and support it and have it taking up space and have it taking up resources, or you can align your product with what the market understands, needs, and wants.
And Isaac, I think adjacent to that is if it's a great idea and it falls down the priority list or drops off the list, if it's still valid, it's going to come back. It's
And
just a
it's going to
question
come
of
back when
when.
you have resources, time, and funding to allot to it, to
Yeah.
dedicate to it. Yeah.
Well, it's this is the reason why I have a whiteboard. There's a lot of good ideas on here that I work on incrementally, and it's just a question of timing.
Yep.
When am I gonna have enough free space? When am I gonna have not necessarily capital, because most of it's intellectual ideas that come out in a blog or training video or something. But it's there to help me focus on the things that I know I want to do when the opportunity gets presented. And this is the same thing when we're developing products,
Yep.
because to your point, and I love this. It's like once it gets to the market and you've got the investors throwing cash at you, and you've got people who are subscribing for multiple years on your SaaS app, and you're just printing currency. At that point, then you can go back and say, okay, cool. Where does this really neat thing that I was thinking about 3 years ago belong in
Yep.
our current project or product strategy? And more important is, will it be a differentiator, or even better, could we spin this thing off as a separate and adjacent piece of software that complements the core system? Scaled
Yeah. And
down versions.
the minute you hit the market, your understanding of the market needs changes. So take the least possible amount to market. And then if that's going to be there, it's going to fit with a more mature understanding of your product and market. I call it you're going to have to move the couch. So I was married for 5 years. We were moving to Oxford, Mississippi to work for a company that was later acquired by CoreLogic. So I was moving to be their senior data engineer. And my wife was sick, so she didn't drive down in the truck with me. She flew down, and I got there early and I got a couple guys, and we unloaded the truck, and I put the couch in the only place that it could be. My wife comes in. Well, obviously, we have to move the couch. And so we had to move the couch, and then move the couch and move the couch and move the couch. And eventually we found out where that couch needed to be, which is where I had it to begin with. But the market, your client, they don't understand what you understand sometimes. So you have to approach this knowing that your understanding is going to evolve at the pace of the market, at the pace of your client, not at the pace of your vision or your ambition. It's a big pill to swallow sometimes as a
Yeah.
founder. Yeah.
Well, and everybody's baby has some redeeming value to it. So
Yeah.
it might just be a long baby.
Well, in the end of the day, even in a small team, everybody's perspective matters. Everybody's input, and the perspective that matters the most isn't on your team because it's the client, it's the market. It's my dad has this story. He was working with injection molding in Michigan, and every year they had this problem where once in a while they would have a short shot on something that had a very expensive material. The part would come out just only halfway formed. So they hired engineering firms and they hired everybody to come in and tell them what was going on, and they couldn't figure it out. So dad was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to sit next to the operator and I'm going to run that machine with them. And after about an hour, he realized that the machine operator knew every single time there was going to be a short shot. And he would call it. He'd be like, oh, going to be a short shot. Going to be a short shot. And finally my dad's like, how do you know this? And he's like, it's cold outside. What do you mean it's cold outside? Well, every time that door opens when it's cold outside, the cold air hits the plastic nozzle and cools it off enough that it can't shoot in there. 2 years they're trying to solve this problem. Nobody went and talked to the operator. So they got some thermal blankets, threw it over the injection coil, and locked the door. Never had another short shot. Get out there, get your idea to the people that understand it as fast as you can. Don't fall in love with the concept, and make sure that the things you are developing, you understand them. Yeah.
Exactly. Go to where the work is being performed.
Yeah. Yeah, and the development is I'm a coder. Tim, you've got a coding background. That comes after. After you've understood your market, after you've done your analysis, after you've gotten the designs and the user experience and the prototypes. No, you can't just jump to coding because we don't like to fail. We don't want to write code. We want to bring solutions to the market and be successful with our clients. Well, I think this has been a really cool conversation. I really thank you for being here today, Tim and Gabriel. It's not just startups, businesses. Anytime you're going to take technology and implement it in your business, you need to have a structured analysis. You need to know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why. Established companies can rely on internal knowledge, but startups and new product development need a strong discovery analysis and upfront planning. Even the existing teams, as Tim was pointing out, you have to know what you're building, what your purpose is, and that purpose has to go all the way down to the juniors on the team. Everybody needs to be unified. Well, this has been a really, really cool conversation here. Don't forget, if you are a startup or if you want to implement technology in your business, Cantalo specializes in building the analysis and building your documentation. We are running a special of 25% off analysis projects that are led by our business, our analysis doctor, Dr. Gabriel Huerta. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for being here, Tim and Gabriel, and we'll see you next time here on The Catalyst Effect.